Hello everyone, this is Raghu Prabhudeva. As part of today's presentation, I'll be talking about informatics for integrating biology and bedside, i2b2, a tool for research data analytics, as part of CS 6440 Intro to Health Informatics and the Department of Computer Science, Georgia Tech. So to kind of start off with basically what the definition of i2b2, what exactly is an i2b2? i2b2 is an open source clinical data analytics platform basically used for querying patient data from an i2b2 research data mart. Basically, this data mart is basically explicitly organized, transformed, person-oriented clinical data, optimized, specifically tailored for clinical research. This i2b2 basically defines an architecture that allows different studies to come together seamlessly. An integration of clinical data, trial data, genotypic data, and knowledge annotation. A portable and extensible software framework is what an i2b2 is. So based on the definition of the i2b2, we came across a terminology called data mart. So what exactly is a research data mart? Research data mart is basically a kind of a patient data warehouse focused specifically tailored for research needs. It's an aggregated data from clinical, especially the EMR, and research-related data sources from other sources that are integrated into one single data repository. The RDM data addresses specifically it's a data that is HIPAA compliant, so that there is no privacy information that is getting lost in this, or so the privacy is basically obfuscated from the query results. So the patient information, personal information is hidden. It is basically a research repository. The i2b2 data mart is a research repository built on the informatics framework. So in the overall sense that the i2b2 framework along with the research data mart ensures that the data exposed or provided for research is HIPAA compliant, and the personal information is not shared across, but there is sufficient data that is available for individual private enterprises to conduct any kind of research. So the overall mission of an i2b2 is basically to provide clinical investigators with tools necessary to integrate medical record and clinical research data. In the genomic age, a software is used to construct and integrate medical clinical research chart. Is basically a set of infrastructure that is put in place to be able to integrate and provide the necessary information and data complying with HIPAA regulations for research purposes. So i2b2 software may be used by an enterprise research community to find sets of interesting data from electronic patient medical health record while preserving patient privacy through a query tool interface. So we have an enterprise-wide client which basically based on the queries that you put in place or the cohort information that you want, does a query of enterprise-wide data, prunes it, removes all the privacy information, and provides that data set meaningful to the research. So it basically, if you see that the overall goal is to repurpose and distribute the medical record data for research and further investigation. So the i2b2's primary purpose or its usage is basically wide to kind of do an enterprise-wide repurposing and distribution of the EMR data primarily targeted for clinical research. Then use of the medical record data in clinical studies focused upon genomics and pharmacology. So those are the primary use cases or how an i2b2 is used. So what were the challenges with getting that data? How the i2b2 solves that purpose, and what is the typical research data workflow is what is depicted in this slide. The basic challenges, the main challenge that exists is to kind of repurpose the data from a medical health record for research purposes, because attempt to do that EMRS data, clean it up can be very, at a global scale, is a very complex and time consuming and cost. So in order to kind of avoid that kind of a thing, the i2b2 plays a role of doing that on behalf of all the researchers, and also making sure that the data coming out of that scrutiny is HIPAA compliant and under the accountability of HIPAA 1996 and the institutional review board's requirement to limit the exposure of enterprise patients while making highly detailed data available on interesting patients to investigate. So if you see the figure, basically you have clinical research data. It comes out of the thing into clinical data warehouses. The clinical data extracted, transformed, and preloaded. Then you integrate it with the research data extracted, transformed, and loaded, and integrated with clinical data. So the HIPAA protected information comes in compliance, which removes all the personal information. There is a HIPAA wall where all the information from a patient personal information is removed, and then it goes into the research data marts. From there, the data can be extracted through an i2b2 web client to be used to build the cohort specific to researchers' use case. So this is basically a much more detailed view on the process that we described in the previous slide. Basically, a set of patients is selected through the enterprise repository and data is gathered into the data mart based on the automated query that search for the patient data or a project purpose. There's the data is queried from the EDR, which kind of matches the given cohort definition. Then the data directly from EDR and other sources are collated. The data collated specifically for the project are then passed through HIPAA wall. All the HIPAA compliant regulations are ensured, and project specific phenotypic data is created to be applied to be queried for any research purpose. This is how a project specific data flow workflow happens, and a specific data set is delivered for the project. So this is a paper basically describes how serving the enterprise and data to our clinical research purpose. A very good paper written on the overall architecture, the data flow, the transformation and availability of data marts, and also the i2b2, how the i2b2 web client itself is used to do the data queries. So here represents an i2b2 enterprise web client, an open source tool for doing i2b2 for query and analysis tools. Once you go into this particular tile, you will find a sample application or a sample web client, so you can log in to explore much more details on how various queries can be performed on the dataset at an enterprise-wide level. So this is basically once you log into the i2b2 web client, this is the main page that comes in. It has 6 sections that helps us to identify, define, and build cohort discovery queries. On the left side, on the term section, it basically defines all the observations, the conditions around the patient that specifically can be included as in the cohort definition. On the queries below, it shows a list of past queries that have been done and the kind of things that has been executed. Also, there is a workspace where you can organize the data set, the specific your specific work folder, and group all the information that are related to your your research area. On the right side is the actual query tool. It basically has 3 sections or many sections like group 1, 2, and 3. The group 1, 2, 3 is where you can add in all the cohort definitions. All these groups can be ANDed or ORed when you're doing that. And then when you see a run query, there is a show query status, which indicates the status of the current query. And once the query is completed, you will see the results in the query results page and a query report page. So basically what you can do is you can choose the conditions observed. You can drag drop specific conditions or observations or any of those terminologies that have been defined, or the medical ontologies that has been defined. You can just pull and drag and drop to each of these columns or groups that has been defined, and it gets handed, and then you can build up your query by calling run query on that. You can also clear the query so that gets cleared. You can even pull the already pre-executed query or the previous history and put it back into the thing and run them again. You can also exclude certain conditions by using the exclude button, and that's how the tool is very efficient to do that enterprise-wide data query. This is an example of a research area, basically a research example wherein we wanted to kind of get a cohort of patients who have diabetes mellitus, especially in the Hispanic race, and we want to do that on children. What we did was we selected a specific age group, which is typically less than 18 years of age, which kind of gives us children, and then we looked up diabetes mellitus. We pulled up that particular concept information into the group 1 category and the age into the group 2 category, and create 3 specifically the race of Hispanic. And then you see that all these 3 groups are kind of ANDed. Basically we wanted to get all these patients with that. And then when you run the query, you get that results at the bottom. Currently, there is no data matching that information, so you have zero cohort number of patients with children having diabetes mellitus in the Hispanic community. So in that way, you can build your queries and get the cohort definitions around. So this is another example of a predefined query wherein essential diabetes is what we want to get. We just want to get a cohort of patients with with the concept essential diabetes. So when you we pulled up the query, already predefined query into the group 1 window, and then we ran the query. We did get a number of patients of 10 people who are available in the database with essential diabetes as a condition. So now we're going to demonstrate basically how to use an i2b2 enterprise-wide web client application to do some kind of queries that can be used for analysis and any kind of data analytics is concerned. So the URL for that is i2b2.org/webclient. When you go in, we're going to use a demo login password into the system. So log into the client. You will see that the client basically has 6 windows. On the left side, you see the various ontologies that is supported for the medical ontologies that can be used to do the queries. The below shows the workspace, basically the user information and the current workspace the user is logged in. The third window shows all the previous queries that has been done and a record of those queries. On the right side, you see groups of tables or rows basically consisting where you can insert various cohort or ontologies to build a cohort group when you're doing a particular area of research. And the query status when the query is executed is displayed here, and the graphical results of the query report are available on the respective channel. So let's go and take a look at example of already pre-created congenital malfunction query. So we try to pull and drag and drop. This will basically show you that we want to query a group of all patients with congenital malfunction. So then once you have that in the group query, we just run through the query. We want to find out the number of patients with that particular specific condition. So when we run that query, you will see that the query status is being displayed here. Once the query happened, the graphical result will show that number of patients with the congenital malfunction is displayed here. Now what we can do is we can also do exclude that particular information. If you want to run a query, close this query. What we'll do is now we'll do an essential diabetes query. So you can and similarly you can run a similar query to find out the number of patients with essential diabetics, which basically shows 10. The other way is now on the terms. So let's take an example on the left side. Basically, you want to kind of find out patients specific any kind of diagnosis that the patient has undergone or kind of thing. For example, we can. So for example, we want to do the query on basically you want to do research on diabetes mellitus in children, especially in the Hispanic community. What we can do is we can do a search term diabetes mellitus. So this will basically you will see that there is a thing you can click and drag and drop. Then what we want to do here, we want to go back to the terms, and we want to specifically pick age, which are children. Basically we want to find out children, so we pick children under the age of 18 years. Then we want to find out by demographics, by the race, and specifically in the Hispanic community, and you can put the Hispanic community on the group side. Now all these conditions are ordered. Basically we want to find children with diabetic mellitus condition, specifically in the Hispanic group, and then we want to run a query on the thing, and then you see the run query happening. Once you find out that the graphical results show that there are no patients in the database for you to perform any sort of this kind of cohort build-up that you can do. This is how you can use the tool basically to build up your cohort set for a specific research area that you are investigating. So in this So to summarize that, we see that i2b2 is basically a research and data analytic tool which can be used to do an enterprise-wide data query, create your own cohort sets using the concepts that were there on the left side with the terms and concepts that were there to be build the query and get the kind of data set that you want. So basically, the slide below here represents all the references that we made when we went through to understand basically what the i2b2 was, what are the kind of tools and technologies that are available, kind of how i2b2 web client itself can be used to do various enterprise-wide data queries, and the mechanisms of creating those queries, so on and so forth. So with that, I pretty much conclude and with the i2b2 presentation. Thank you.